My friend, the leader of the opposition, Shri Arun Jaitley, the author, Shri Shishir Gupta, distinguished ladies and gentlemen. I thought that the debate in the Rajya Sabha would be over today, and therefore I welcome the opportunity to speak without interruption. Unfortunately, the debate is not over, and Arun has cautioned me that he intends to join the debate tomorrow. Therefore, I would have to reserve some of my thoughts for tomorrow, but I can't exhaust all my ideas today. This is an unusual book. I think you should read it, but I must caution you, it's not light reading. It's not bedtime reading. It's not something you can read while watching the latest soap on television. In fact, the first few chapters will be difficult to read. And if I may give a word of friendly advice to Shishir and his publisher, I think the first few chapters require some addition. But then the book gathers pace, and the second half of the book, when it begins to deal with the terrorist incidents beginning 2001, then I think it becomes easier to read and easier to understand. But I would strongly urge those of you who are interested in the complex issues of internal security to kindly read the book. More accurately, kindly buy the book and read the book. Now, the title of the book tells you what it is about. It's about the Indian Mujahideen. It is obviously the enemy within. The Indian Mujahideen has a history. The book traces how the Indian Mujahideen was born and the men who shaped it, built it, and who run it even today. As Arun said, for some time we thought that all terrorist attacks in India originated from Pakistan. And we were comfortable in the belief that it was cross-border terrorism. And if Pakistan stopped doing what it did, India would be free of terror attacks. I've said on many occasions, and I wish to repeat it, that we live in perhaps the most troubled and most vulnerable neighborhood in the whole world. Earlier it was Israel, Palestine, Lebanon, Syria. Now that has shifted to Afghanistan, Pakistan, South Asia. And the sooner we recognize that we live in a neighborhood where one of the most intense conflicts is being waged, and we are also surrounded by either fragile or weak states, the sooner we realize that, the better prepared we will be to deal with our challenges. The number of major terror attacks that take place every year around the world amounts to many dozens. In fact, in the first half of this year, there have been over 50 major terrorist attacks around the world. There was one in Karachi day before yesterday. There was one in China 3 days ago. The bulk of them happen in Iraq, Afghanistan, Pakistan. And India is therefore clearly vulnerable, with far more sophisticated instruments for communication, more sophisticated than, say, for example, I understand. Maybe younger people in this audience who are more tech savvy will understand this better. And with travel becoming easier and easier every day, I think the whole world is now vulnerable to terror attacks. Arun said that the US had not had a terror attack after 9/11. That's a tribute to the US publicity machinery. It's factually wrong. It's factually wrong that the US had not had any terror attacks after 9/11. In fact, there are documented cases of terror attacks. And if Arun raises this point tomorrow in Rajya Sabha, I'll reply to him tomorrow in the Rajya Sabha. So I'll give you one example. The Fort Hood attack left 13 people dead. And many people forget that it was a terror attack. There are many other examples, but I'll have to reserve some ammunition for tomorrow. The Fort Hood attack was a terror attack by a radicalized person. 13 people were killed. Likewise, other cities in the world are vulnerable. I met with the chief prefet of Paris. I met with NYPD's legendary police chief, Ray Kelly. Ian Blair, until 4 years ago, the chief constable of London, Scotland Yard, until he was sacked by the newly elected mayor. He met with me a few weeks ago. None of them could tell me that their city was completely safe. They say we live from day to day. If today ends peacefully and we go to bed today peacefully, we have had a peaceful day. But that doesn't mean tomorrow will necessarily be peaceful. That's because of mobility, the ease of communication, the ease of travel, and above all, this is a completely new phenomenon, the ease of being radicalized and converted into a terrorist. Radicalization no longer takes place face to face. Most terrorists today are radical on the internet. There are any number of recent examples where a terrorist has been radicalized simply through the internet. Which is why in Cheltenham, I'm sure you know what they do there, there are dozens and dozens of young men and women doing nothing but scouring the internet just to find out who's doing what. And every telephone conversation is monitored. So we are living in a very complex world where the enemy is not an identified or identifiable organization. Sometimes it is, like Al-Qaeda, like the Taliban, like the Indian Mujahideen. But it could be individuals who are simply radicalized and converted. And we have to build capacity to deal with this kind of challenge. The one thing I agree with Arun is, while many of us in the establishment have a fair understanding of the gravity of the challenge, we are still not able to whip the machinery into responding quickly to build the capacity that is required to meet the challenge. Our ability in capacity building is limited. Much has been done. Shishir pointed out the police population ratio. It's pathetic, but in 2010, state governments taken together had recruited 90,000 constables. Never in a calendar year that the states of India have recruited 90,000. It's not easy to recruit 100,000 or 200,000. That itself is difficult. But the problems of recruitment are even more difficult. You recruit somebody, you have to train him. You need training capacity. And you find the training capacity, you need trainers. And then when you induct them into a police force, you need housing, you need barracks, you need clothing, you need shoes, you need equipment, you need arms. It's not simply that I want 100,000 people and I can have 100,000 policemen tomorrow. The lead time for recruitment is 1 year. The lead time for training is 10 months. So inducting somebody, if I decide today to have a policeman, will take me a year and 10 months. Therefore, I compliment the states for recruiting 90,000 people in year 2010, and I'm sure they will do the same in 2011. They must do more, because there are 600,000 vacancies which still remain unfilled. The Central Paramilitary Forces have recruited 100,000 people after I took over. And they plan to recruit another 100,000 this year. Imagine what it requires in terms of training capacity, trainers, equipping them and inducting them and deploying them. So I think while much needs to be done, what we are really doing is getting over the consequences of neglect of several years. I'm not pointing a finger at this government or that government. It is this. State has been tardy and negligent in dealing with the nature of the problem. Given that, what does this book say? This book has a thesis. The thesis is that a very large number of Indian young men have been radicalized, and they pose a challenge to the security and sovereignty in India. That's the thesis. It also attempts, and that's a bit controversial, it also attempts to explain how this movement originated.